When you're pursuing your passion, you should try your best to make time for your passions, but you should also not be tied to the results of that passion work. And I think that Gretchen Rubin does a great job explaining that in this section of the book. This is her September part of the challenge where she's talking about pursuing a passion. She says, although reading was one of my most important priorities and certainly one of my greatest pleasures, I never really gave it much thought. I wanted to make more time to read more books with more enjoyment. To do so, I gave myself permission to read at a whim. Samuel Johnson observed, if we read without inclination, half the mind is employed in fixing the attention. So there's about one half to be employed on what we read. And she says that science actually backs this up. When researchers tried to figure out what helped third and fourth graders remember what they read, they found that students' interest in a passage was far more important than the readability or the ease of their ability to read it, of the passage, 30 times more important. Which is also why if you have children and you want them to read, you shouldn't be pressuring them on what specific genre to read. You shouldn't try to tell them, oh, don't read that, unless it's inappropriate. You shouldn't be trying to tell them like, oh, don't read that. You should let them lean into whatever their interest is so that they can develop a love for reading and not have this disdain for reading because every time they read something, it's something that mom wants me to read, right? So if you let them lean into the things that they like to read, even if it's a silly little comic book, even if it's like random facts about history, whatever it is that they gravitate towards is what you should allow them to do so that they can develop a love, a joy, and a passion for reading, and they don't feel like tied to finish something or to read something just because you told them to. So she says, between the books I read for happiness research, I'm not going to list all of the books because she read a lot of them. She said that she learned that you should allow yourself to reread things that you're interested in and not pressure yourself to read things just because they're popular. And she even goes as far as to admitting that she will probably never read the traditional books like Pride and Prejudice, To Kill a Mockingbird, all of those things because they're not something that when she read it, she enjoyed it. And she doesn't pressure herself to finish a book just because she started it. And I feel like that's the same thing. Now, although she's talking about reading, we're also making this connection to passion work. So just because you start doing this project that you're supposedly passionate about, if there's no fizz, if there's no interest, you don't have to pressure yourself to finish it. That's part of the discovery in adulthood of, just like we talked about in the last excerpt about discovering ways to have fun and finding out what's fun for you. Part of the challenges of adulthood is that a lot of times we've been groomed out of our passion work and we've been groomed and conditioned to focus on monetization and doing things to survive. So a lot of us don't know what we're passionate about. So on this trek to figure it out, just because you start something doesn't mean that you have to finish it. You should actually enjoy the thing that you're doing. And so she did say that she stopped, she stopped reading books that she didn't enjoy. And again, she's talking about books, but remember, we're making this overall connection to passion. She said, I used to pride myself on finishing every book I started. No longer. Just like you may pride yourself on finishing every little project that you start. But if you're not interested in it, if it's not fulfilling to you, and if it's not damaging any other people to quit, like, I'm obviously not saying quit your job if it's unfulfilling and that's how you provide for your family. But like, if you start a little passion project on the side, like a little cake decorating business, and you despise decorating cakes after a while, it's okay to quit, girl. You don't have to keep going. So then she, this is when she went on to explain how she used to force herself to finish reading things, but then she found that it was pretty useless. So don't do that. And then she also said that in her discovering that and not making the decision to force herself to finish, you end up having more time. Because let's say this is a book that I'm reading and I force myself to finish it, even though I don't really want to finish it. I can't now complain about how little time I have because I could get at least another 2 to 3 hours of my life back by not finishing that book that I'm not enjoying. Same thing with all of your passions. So the other thing that she talks about is forgetting about the results. And I think this is also really important. When we start something, oftentimes we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to get something out of it. If you read a book, for instance, you might put pressure on yourself to take away all these life lessons. And that kind of takes away from the joy of just reading the book. Like, yes, I unpack these books and I do this all the time, but that's just because I'm a certified yapper. So she says, as I read, I love to take notes, often for no apparent reason. I'm always marking up books, making odd lists, gathering examples in strange categories, copying passages. For some reason, I like working on some permanent, undefined research project. I feel compelled to make lists of foreign words that describe concepts that English can't convey. And then she lists some of the words, which I honestly cannot pronounce. And then she says, explanations of concepts that I find queerly charged with significance: the Fisher King, the Westerly Road, Croatian. mysteries, offering of the first fruits, hunting of the wren. She goes on and on and on, and hundreds of other topics. Note taking takes a lot of time and energy, and I used to discourage this impulse in myself. It seemed pointless and self-indulgent. But following this month's resolutions and my first commandment to be Gretchen, that's her name, I allowed myself to forget about the results and take notes guilt-free. And the way that this connects to passion work is, again, sometimes we feel pressured to find a passion just so that we can monetize it. And that's especially true now. Everybody's like, monetize your TikTok, post your content, monetize yourself, brand it, like make yourself a brand, all these things. And it's so much pressure to do that. And you don't have to. So she's talking about how she'll read books and she takes notes, but she doesn't really do anything with the notes. Sometimes it's just in a notebook that she never looks at again. And that's okay. So you might be doing something that has no real purpose or meaning, but it's fulfilling to you. And that's the point. So if you find something that's fulfilling to you, you find something that you're passionate about, don't put pressure on yourself to make it something that it's not. Don't put pressure on yourself to try to carry it into another category where it can be beneficial for other people and beneficial monetarily for you, because that's just not necessary. And it takes away from the fun of it. So she says she allowed herself to forget about these results and to take the notes while she's reading guilt-free. Then she says, it was only once that I said to myself, okay, Gretchen, take all the notes you want. It doesn't matter why. That it occurred to me how useful these notes have been. My first book, Power, Money, Fame, Sex, grew out of a huge body of notes. When I had a chance to write my book, Profane Waste, about the question of why people would choose to destroy their possessions, I was able to pack the book with startling apt examples, because I've been taking notes for no discernible reason for years. So she's basically saying in her doing that note taking and not being attached to the results, those notes actually came in handy later. And I'm saying that, but just because she did that doesn't mean that they had to. So let's say you start making bracelets and you're just making all these bracelets, not to give them to anybody, but you're making bracelets and storing them in a box, and that's just that. And then later on you have children and they find the bracelets and they love them. Well, now that purpose is given to somebody else. But you could very well go through your life and never have any children, never meet any other children, and now these bracelets are just in a box and it's something that you created. That's okay too. Don't be tied to the result, because the purpose of finding passion work is not to benefit anybody directly. It's not even really to benefit you. It's to find something that you can lose yourself in doing. It's to find something that you enjoy doing. And great if it starts to benefit other people. But if it doesn't, great if it allows you to earn money. But if it doesn't, so the whole idea of being able to find your passion, I think it's more fun when there's no pressure. There's no pressure on time and how much time you need to do it or how much time you have to spend doing it, and when there's no pressure to get a specific result. So if you pick up a hobby, don't try to be the best person to ever do it. Just do the hobby. If you do start posting on the internet, don't try to get the most followers and gain X amount of followers in this many days. Just do it because you enjoy doing it. If you start whatever it is that you're going to start, don't be attached to results and don't put pressure on yourself to deliver a certain result. And I think that that's what this section is all about. Just freely pursuing a passion in a way that allows you to be absorbed in it and in a way that really allows you to enjoy it without those external pressures, because we have enough pressure on ourselves to do everything else. Please don't let your passion be something that's pressured.